Wake up, America. I think I got something to say to you. I love the United States of America, and I want you to love the United States of America too. Wake Up America Radio with Dr. A and Lou Bell is not a safe space, so enter at your own risk. You will be exposed to the truth, and we will endure the consequences. Now, rest assured, Dr. A will not try to put his brain into your head. I will, however, motivate you to think and to use the analytical part of your brain that very few people want to use because it requires actual effort and actual work. Welcome, everybody, to Wake Up America Radio with Dr. A. And by the way, Lou Esposito is on the line. Those of you listening know she is the producer of the show, my sidekick, and I've given her the honorary tactical call sign of a naval aviator, Wench.
And you've relegated me to a by the way.
By the way. The producer, but she doesn't take crap from anybody, even Dr. A, as you noticed by that feisty little attitude right there. And obviously you're there because you're talking, Lou. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm here because I'm talking.
You know,
and
I got
a couple
things I want to say before we get into this now. First one, I think I've asked this before. Lou, how could any human being eat black-eyed peas?
But
I don't get it.
They're delicious.
Maybe I need to come up and live in North Carolina for a while to figure this out. But
you're in the heart of black-eyed pea country. You're in Georgia.
That's why I was sick all day yesterday. Okay, well, I didn't know that.
You were sick from black-eyed peas?
I had a soup at Carrabba's that they something with sausage, and I took a couple bites. I said, "Are there black-eyed peas in the soup?" She goes, "Well, of course." I said, "Oh my gosh!" I couldn't believe she duped me into eating black-eyed peas. And then I finished the bowl and I was fine. But
I can't imagine somebody having to be duped into eating black-eyed peas.
Well, Southern California surfer boys have to be duped into eating anything but stuff from Southern California, but. It ended up being okay. I just wanted you to know that, but I didn't understand black-eyed peas from the beginning. But here's the other thing I want to talk about before we get into this. It's kind of like a special 4th of July edition as well as analyzing the presidency. You know, we started this program because we both knew that there are indeed people out in America who have received a college degree from Cornell University, and we decided that it was up to us to properly educate these poor souls. Isn't that correct, Lou?
Well, yeah, but not everybody that got their degree at Cornell is brainwashed.
Name one.
Stacey Lennox. She's got a good head on her shoulders.
Was a Cornell chick?
Yeah, you did.
Of course, that'll amuse Tina Dillingham and her husband there. What's his name? Slickery Trigger.
Yeah, Slickery Trigger.
Yeah, that'll amuse him. Let me just, before we get into analyzing two of your favorite presidents with that model that I introduced last week of presidential leadership and performance, I'm going to analyze Ronald Reagan for you and Bill Clinton.
Yeah, right, because Bill
Who's been in the news
lately.
He's been in the news lately for a pejorative reason. We'll talk about that. But here's what I'm going to tell the listeners out there. You must refuse to celebrate the 4th of July. The 4th of July, folks, is not a holiday, any more so than is the 5th of July. They are dates on the calendar. The holiday we celebrate, which falls on the 4th day of July, is American Independence Day. Independence Day is the holiday. Yet over the years, we've become conditioned to drop the name and instead refer to the date. Is it small? Is it subtle? Yes, on both counts. But is it petty? Absolutely not. We live in a nation, Lou, wherein our leadership, meaning Barack Hussein Obama, just changed the oath of allegiance for legal immigrants to our nation that they must take so as to exclude the former requirement to pledge to defend the United States of America. We live in a nation where our leader, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, while standing on foreign soil, repeatedly apologizes for our nation's behavior and calls America, and by proxy, folks, Americans, arrogant. Where our countrymen plead for assistance to our leaders to come save their lives and protect them, give them security, but instead are left to fend for themselves or perish. We are currently being led by individuals for whom our sense of national pride is foolishness, and the acknowledgement of American exceptionalism is viewed as a delusion of imperialistic grandeur. How dare we think that we're better than anybody else? Well, you know what, folks? We are. America-hating globalists, many of whom call America their home, would just love to see certain memories fade, certain attitudes dumbed down, and certain practices inside of our country ceased to exist. Practices such as the celebration of America's independence and her subsequent rise to become the greatest superpower in the history of planet Earth. They'd prefer to see America descend. That's their preference. Not continue to ascend, and by just about any objective observation or standard. For the past 7.5 years, that's what America has been doing under Barack Hussein Obama in the White House. We've been descending. These globalists would love to see us forever say and celebrate the 4th of July with as little or no reference to exactly what we're celebrating on that date as is possible. They'd like to see the words and memories scrubbed from our history books, not taught in our classrooms and schools, dropped from the public conscience. And in these efforts, they are in many ways right now, Lou, succeeding. We, true American patriots who actually love this country and what the Founding Fathers gave us as far as values and principles, we must be the ones to turn it around, to stand up with courage and conviction and defend the Founding Fathers' creation. Therefore, I'd like to challenge you patriots, you true American patriots, this year and every year thereafter, to begin referring to this holiday by its correct name, Independence Day. That's not just a movie with Will Smith. Many men and women, better than you or me, sacrificed all to gain this nation's independence from the crown.
There's a sequel to that movie, by the way.
I heard it stinks.
Well, there's a new sequel. Of course it stinks. It's a sequel.
Well, I think there's only been one sequel. Well, 2 sequels that were any good. The Star Wars sequels are pretty good. Godfather's sequel, the second one's pretty good. You know what? Again, many men and women better than you and me sacrificed their all to gain this nation's independence from Great Britain and the crown, King George III. Let's honor their memory and the glorious gift of liberty, of freedom they bestowed upon us. A gift, folks, that is still giving some 240 years later by referring to this holiday by its proper name, America's Independence Day. After all, we don't say Merry 25th of December, do we, Lou?
Not yet, but it might be on its way.
Oh, my goodness. You know what? The Declaration of Independence, folks, is the statement adopted by the Second Continental Congress, who were meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
It was
adopted on
King
July
George.
4th, 1776. What did you say again, Lou?
It was basically a letter to King George.
It really was.
Wow.
What it did was it announced that the 13 colonies were free. We had been at war for almost a year with the Kingdom of Great Britain at that time. So by this document, we regarded ourselves as a newly independent sovereign nation and no longer under British rule. Instead, the colonies formed this new nation, the United States of America. John Adams, our second president, was a leader in pushing for independence, which actually passed on July 2nd in that Second Continental Congress with no opposing votes cast. Committee of 5 had already drafted the formal declaration to be ready when Congress voted on independence. The term Declaration of Independence is not used in the document itself. John Adams persuaded the committee to select Thomas Jefferson, as we all know, hopefully, from school, to compose the original draft of the document, which Congress then would edit to produce its final version. The Declaration, people, was ultimately a formal explanation of why Congress had voted on July 2nd to declare independence from Great Britain, and again, more than a year after the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War. The next day, July 3rd, John Adams wrote to his wife, Abigail Adams. He said this: "The second day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. But the national birthday, Independence Day, will be celebrated on July 4th. That's the date the Declaration of Independence was actually signed." You know, the The sources and interpretation of that document, the Declaration of Independence, have been the subject of much scholarly and not so scholarly inquiry over the years. The Declaration justified the independence of the United States by listing our colonial grievances against King George III, the tyrant that ruled, and by asserting certain, how should I put this, natural and legal rights, including what John Locke taught us, your favorite philosopher, the right of revolution, the right to revolt, people. We still today have that right to revolt against a government that engaged in usurpations of our freedom and liberty, chips away at us. They're doing it right now, people. Having served its original purpose in announcing independence, reference to the text of the Declaration after that in the following years were few. Abraham Lincoln, although, made it the centerpiece of his rhetoric. You can see that in the Gettysburg Address, and the centerpiece of his policies. Since then, it has become well known for its statement on human rights. Now, here, what I want to do is what all my students have had to do for every class I teach. They have to read this right here. This is the unanimous declaration of the 13 states of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, let me read that again, folks, listen very carefully, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and their happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses, 7.5 years worth maybe, and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, tyranny, it is their right, no, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, maybe even these 50 states, Lou, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain, insert President of the United States, if you will, is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states, over these people. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And in that case, in this document, Lou, Thomas Jefferson gave us 26 different things that the King of England had done to injure the United States, the 13 colonies. And you know what? That's happening right now. And here's how he concluded this. In every stage of these 26 oppressions, we have patiently petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Listen to that, people. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. Insert the liberals here. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature, their sycophants, if you will, to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them, our brethren, the liberals, of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and our correspondence with these people. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice, I say mind raped, and our plight. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, peace in friendship. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, I insert true American patriots here, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the vicissitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of the colonies, I insert United States of America, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown. How about the Democratic Party, the cultural Marxists? And that all political connection between them to the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right enjoy. And the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now, I'm not sure how many people have actually read those words, Lou. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, probably. Probably not a lot. I think that it's like the Constitution, that they know quotes from it and parts of it. And I think that even those people are probably few and far between. You know, I don't think the average person, even maybe not the average person, but most people in this country don't know our founding documents, understand them, or understand the history behind them. Unfortunately.
Well, they need to, because it is
and here's why.
God's shining city set upon a hill. I believe
exactly. And here's why they need to understand it. You talked about the 26 points that they went through, the injuries of King George. You can, and I've done this recently, you can go through those 26 points and relate nearly every one of them, if not all of them, to something that our government does to us today. Exactly. And just for example, there's the taxation without representation. Well, when a government bureaucracy or bureaucrat establishes a new regulation and imposes it upon the people without the approval of Congress, that is taxation without representation. And if you don't think it is, read the Stamp Act. It was not a tax. It was a regulation.
Exactly. Great point.
Yeah, and that precipitated, the Stamp Act was the final straw that established the Sons of Liberty, that brought our founding fathers together, and that precipitated the American Revolution. So
that's why when I was reading the Declaration, I inserted in spots that I thought was appropriate: the United States of America, the American people, the knucklehead liberals who, and their Islamo communists in the White House, and Mrs. Clinton, hopefully, going to be in the big house one day.
Well, and I think rather than inserting on the other side for the King George's part in that document, I think rather than inserting that the appropriate body or entity to insert there would be the federal bureaucracy, the federal regulators, and
right.
not because they're the ones that are amassing power on behalf of the politicians and, in coordination with the politicians. So it is the political power structure, but it is driven by the bureaucracy. And if you don't believe that, look at the politicians in power now and track back their history in the bureaucracy. Some of them, most of them, if not all of them, have touched, especially the most egregious ones, have touched or been involved in our bureaucracy at some level.
I'm not exonerating the knuckleheads in the Republican Party either, of which there are many of them in the Republican Party that are just in collusion to keep their power. And you talk about bureaucracy, that's a great point. You look at German sociologist Max Weber. He said, if you want to find the real power in government, look at the bureaucracy. That's
Absolutely.
Where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely, and communism was founded on that. And this is something that I've said since I was in college. Marx was not looking for a utopia. He was looking for a way to make the bureaucrats the power structure. He was and back in that day and in his society, you basically followed whatever professional path your father had. His father was a bureaucrat.
Right. Exactly.
End of story. I mean, it's the same Machiavellian principle, but just applied to bureaucracy. So, and with that, I think we need to take a break. Are you ready?
Oh, okie dokie. We'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll analyze the American presidency.
All right, we'll be right back.
This is JD.
And this is Stacy.
Join us Tuesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern for Game On. Remember,
lock up the children and the old folks.
Game On, the home of libertarian conservatism.
Where no one is safe, and no one is spared, not even the hosts.
Oh, that was supposed to be a spin cycle. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We love you anyway. Right round, baby.
Self-monitoring
right
Ebola radio strikes again.
Anyway.
Anybody see the host monkey? Where's the host monkey? Where's the host monkey? For God's sake, I need an antidote. Just do your rant. Let's pop out of the segment.
Find us on Twitter at JD and Stacy.
You're listening to K98Talk.com.
I've seen this happen before. There's a full moon out tonight. I'm a fool, but you can't fool me twice. I wear my secret deception just like a disguise. When I reveal myself in the light, stick around and you might pay the price. Enough with the questions, it's time that we said our goodbyes.
I knew that this wouldn't be easy.
Try not to tie it down.
No, nothing you say can appease me.
If you wanted to go, then you would have been gone before now. The darkness abounds.
Music for Wake Up America Radio is provided by Tennessee Jed, whose new CD, Stronger, is available on iTunes. Great, go.
Okay, folks, we're back after we talked there a little bit about the Independence Day, Declaration of Independence for our country, our great nation of America. Last week, we started analyzing the American presidency and people that have served in that office and what are the approaches to actually trying to understand greatness or failure in the White House. It's something that we do all the time. We don't really realize it. We have all these polls that measure approval rating and that sort of stuff in different areas. And in my classes, I ask my students to write down their top 3 presidents And then we discussed those top 3 presidents. It's a diverse opinion, by the way. And then I asked them, upon what variables did you gauge greatness? Some people just thought John Kennedy was a good-looking guy. Some people thought Ronald Reagan, was a cowboy. That's why they voted for him and said he was greatest. But there are more scholarly ways to analyze the American presidency, or how should I put this, approaches to analyze the presidency. The first approach, probably the most popular, is the power approach. And we talked last week about Richard Neustadt, who was a staffer for Eisenhower, wrote a book called Presidential Power and the Modern Presidents. I refer to that a lot. All my presidency students will read that book. So there's the power approach to analyzing the presidency. Then there's the character approach. Lou, does character matter in the presidency?
Absolutely.
Oh, you got that right. James David Barber wrote a book called Presidential Character. So there's the character approach. Then there's the policy-making approach. So Lupin Scholl wrote a great book called President and Congress, analyzing how the president interacts with the Congress in the legislative process to create public policy, and that's the public policy approach. And the last approach is the greatness approach. Murray and Blessing wrote a great book, fantastic book called Greatness in the White House. Now, these 4 approaches, I argue, can be subsumed under the concept of presidential leadership. All of these are independent variables, if you will, in the model of presidential leadership. I would say also included in this model should be things like political leadership, foreign policy leadership, impact on history, domestic policy leadership. Each one of those variables would possess a small amount of the total causality in explaining presidential leadership and a certain percentage of the total causal factor. This comes to us from the 1950s because the behavioralist approach became the en vogue way to study complex social relations in social sciences. Okay, as you all know, the purpose of science is understanding phenomena through description, explanation, and prediction. And unlike the natural sciences, political science is not a science of certainties. It is a science of probabilities. And that's what a whole bunch of the political scientists started doing, mathematical modeling. That became their paradigm to determine causality, okay, determine the impact of various independent variables or causal factors on the outcome of a phenomenon, the dependent variable. This is where multiple regression analysis came into play. Now, in natural science, Lou, we can usually explain phenomenon by using recursive causality. What does that mean? A causes B. One variable can cause one result. It's recursive. But in complex social relations, causality is never recursive. It's non-recursive relationships. There are many different reasons or variables why you ended up with the result that you ended up with. A fully specified model would have, I don't know how many different variables. I have no idea. You could keep adding them. Now, last week, Lou, I gave you 6 variables in my model for analyzing the presidency. So let's take a moment to use this model to examine the presidential performance of 2 presidents, your favorite, Ronald Reagan, and Miss Stacy's favorite, Bill Clinton. Is that true?
Absolutely. That is not Stacy's favorite, but Reagan is just to clarify, Reagan is my favorite modern president.
I thought Bill Clinton was Stacey Lennox's favorite president.
You know better than that. You know better than that.
Misinformed. Okay, all right.
Reagan is my favorite modern president. He's not my favorite president overall. He's my favorite modern.
And those of you who don't know, the modern presidency began with FDR. That's when the so-called scholars will say the modern presidency began with FDR. Let's look at Ronald Reagan, Lou's favorite. Given the centrality of appeals to the public in the modern presidency, it is remarkable, people, that Reagan was the first White House occupant who had been a career public communicator before entering politics. Ronald Reagan turned his professionalism to great advantage, carrying off his rhetorical responsibilities with a virtuosity exceeded maybe only by FDR. He and his aides, his staffers, managed to make effective use of what they call the line of the day approach to public presidential public messages. They still use that today, Lou, the line of the day. I did not have sex with that woman. Islam is a religion of peace. Do you get it, folks? That's the line of the day. That's what everybody will talk about.
It was a video.
That video, that YouTube video that nobody saw, that caused what happened in Benghazi as they carry on from what happened in Cairo. Thank you, you lying piece of womanhood, Mrs. Rice, who basically got her talking points from Obama. Nothing happens without Obama's express permission and direction.
But he never knows about it, according to Josh Ernest.
He reads about it in the news next day, or he sees it on CNN. He's a liar, people, just like Mrs. Clinton and her husband Hillary, who just had a really nice chance meeting on the tarmac there in Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport with Loretta Lynch. Is that kind of a funny coincidence, folks? Can you think about that for a second? His wife is under criminal investigation by the FBI, who works for the Attorney General, Mrs. Lynch.
Well, and the great thing was that at the presser the day after, Josh Ernest was asked about it, and he said, well, I haven't talked to him about it, but what I can tell you what he thinks is, and then he proceeded to say what he thinks. Well, if you haven't talked to him, Josh, how do you know what he thinks?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. He was told what to say.
Right.
You know, that wasn't a chance meeting, and I think she needs to actually leave. She might need to resign.
I think she should resign. Yeah.
You know why? Maybe you don't get this, folks. Listen to Dr. Ray. Trust Dr. Ray on this one subject. Barack Obama and Bill Clinton will be the first two witnesses called in the trial of the century of Mrs. Clinton. They'll be the first two witnesses called because they both knew what she was doing. They're complicit. That's going to happen. We kind of got ahead of ourselves there. But you know what? Line of the day. That's what we're talking about, the line of the day. Reagan and his staffers were also, during his 8 years, masters of the atmospheres of presidential communication, consistently providing television with irresistible images that dominated the evening news. That's what we talked about several months ago, the presidential spectacle, Lou. It really is important to getting the president's message across to a compliant set of people in the masses. As a communicator, the first variable in this model of presidential leadership and analysis, as a communicator, Ronald Reagan offers lessons that any chief executive should and could take to heart. But the organizational side of his presidency is mainly a source of warnings. Reagan appears to have had no general views about presidential organization. His presidency, I have argued several times before in the past, was a laboratory for examining the impact of a president's advisors on presidential performance. When Reagan's assistants in his administration took advantage of his strengths and protected him from his weaknesses, the results were often impressive, as was the case with the enactment of his tax cut in the economic program of 1981. But when the reverse was the case, Lou, there was a danger of such misadventures as the Iran-Contra affair. Mm-hmm. Now, for all of his limitations, and all of us have limitations, but for all of his limitations, Reagan possessed exceptional political skills. He was active in selling his policies within the political community as he was in promulgating them to the wider public audience. And yet, I argue, he was far more than a mere front man. Reagan was decisive in setting the direction of his administration's programs. He also had impressive negotiation skills, a necessary resource that any president needs to be a successful leader. No matter what their visions of Reagan, this is continuing on in the model, no matter what your views of Reagan or my views of Reagan, no one would accuse him of lacking vision, the fourth aspect of my model. It was evident to all that he was committed to a handful of policies, things like a strong military, low taxes, and much less government involvement in the economy and in people's everyday lives. It was also crystal clear that he was adamantly opposed to the Soviet Union, part of his axis of evil. Reagan's convictions and his vision for the nation, I would say, provided a beacon for his political counterparts. Lou, what you saw was what you got with Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
Now, Reagan's cognitive limitations, I would argue, were a little bit troublesome. This was a president who never fully grasped the logic of nuclear deterrence and genuinely believed that, at least at his time in history, it would be possible to produce an invulnerable space shield to nuclear weapons. Still, I believe there was more to Reagan's intellect than meets the eye. While he was not endowed with superior logical abilities, he was gifted at interpersonal relationships and strategic use of both verbal and body language. Of course, these are traits that are more common to actors, usually, than politicians, although it's becoming more and more a trait that politicians use as well in their personal spectacle to get elected and reelected. Ronald Reagan succeeded at turning these things to good political effect. Reagan was like FDR in that his leadership was better served by his temperament than by his intelligence. He always projected an image of self-confidence, but not arrogance. He was comfortable with himself. Dr. Ray is not arrogant. I'm just self-confident in an extreme way, and comfortable with myself. As all naval aviators are, I'm reaching out to you, Hammy, to let you know I've been watching what's happening on Twitter with you and Ari dealing with those knuckleheads. Now, for example, Reagan was confident in his own perceptions, feeling free to ignore his conservative base when he sensed that the United States could do business with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Reagan was also like FDR in not fully revealing himself, or his inner self. He did not do that. His aides held him in great respect, Lou, but never really felt fully bonded to him in their relationship. Ronnie Reagan was marked by a discomfort with face-to-face disagreement that I would say limited his ability to get the most from his advisors. Still, he showed no signs of insecurity, no signs of anger or other, disruptive emotions that could intrude on his presidential leadership. Reagan's emotional intelligence, we talked about that last week in the model, those qualities of emotional intelligence were well suited to the role in which he was cast by the American people. As such, Reagan's presidency, despite what the left wants to try to drill into your heads and mind rape you, was a total success when you look at the aggregate of what he did as the American president. Lou, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, overall it was definitely a success, which is why he's my favorite modern president is because of that. It's the overall, when you get to the end of the analysis, overall he was extremely successful, and I think that makes him a great president.
How about your buddy Bill Clinton? Let's talk about Bill Clinton.
Okay.
At his best, Bill Clinton was an outstanding public communicator. He was at the top of his form. This is my opinion. He was at the top of his form when he was on the defensive. But at his worst, he was long-winded, unfocused, and off-message, which is to say that his rhetoric mirrored the rest of his leadership. Clinton's rhetorical shortcomings were most evident early on in his presidency when he stepped on his own lines by making multiple statements within the same news cycle. He was also quite capable of discarding his prepared text, something that Clinton is not able to do, and then ad-libbing his way into political trouble, which is why Barack Obama doesn't do it, because when he gets off that teleprompter, he ad-libs his way into extreme political trouble. Mm-hmm. Clinton did the same thing. The oxymoronic organization of the Clinton White House, I've often compared to a little boy's soccer team with no assigned position and each player chasing after the soccer ball. The Clinton White House did not fit the existing models, there are two, of presidential organization. It followed neither the spokes in the wheel principle, where the president coordinates his own advisory team, nor did it follow the hierarchical model. in which the president employs a strong chief of staff to coordinate his activities and the activities of everybody around him. Clinton's presidential staff, his aides, flowed freely from issue to issue, and Clinton spent much of his time in meetings in which participation was a function of whoever bothered to show up. Despite the freedom that Clinton afforded to his staffers, he was not the kind of president who was beloved by his aides. His associates found him extremely difficult to advise. Why? Because of his inconsistency on political policies. He was also subject to, and his wife as well, wild fits of anger, extreme anger, and this soon became a source of embarrassment to his staff. As one might expect of someone whose adult life was devoted to politics, Clinton was capable of impressive displays of political skill, but he was likewise susceptible, Lou, to astonishing missteps and miscalculations. The unevenness of Clinton's performance was a partial function of his, readiness to change his policies in response to political exigencies and his tendency to overreach himself under favorable political circumstances. The Clinton presidency was marked by a few political victories. The most impressive of them occurred when he was on the defensive, and he was in 1995 able to beat the forces of Newt Gingrich during that shutdown government. His perhaps most memorable failure, thanks to his wife, was the defeat of his health care proposal. No American president, Lou, exceeded Clinton in his grasp of policy specifics, especially in the domestic sphere. But his was a mastery that did not translate into a clearly defined vision for the nation. Clinton's intelligence did indeed enable him to envisage complexity, but his intensely political nature led him to modify his positions from context to context. There can be no better contrast than that between Bill Clinton, whose positions were open to modification, and Reagan, who was sort of vague about the details of his policy, but stood firmly for a broad handful of principles.
Yep.
Now, there was never any doubt about Clinton's impressive intelligence and his cognitive abilities. He was, to this day, a voracious reader who alternates between demanding works of public policy and fiction. He was a sponge for facts and had an ability to synthesize complex material quite easily. But, as Dr. A has argued before, there was also a problem in this realm. Clinton lacked the ability to cut to the core of a problem or to make balanced assessments of a complex issue. Indeed, Clinton fit the description of the lawyer who masters issues with the speed of oil covering water, but sometimes he does so at the same depth, Lou. What do you think about that so far?
Well, I think you're pretty much right on with Clinton. I think that the weaknesses and the shortcomings you're talking about are true signs of narcissism, but if you want to get to the news, you got to wrap it up.
All right, she's handling me. This politically gifted individual, this emotionally challenged William Jefferson Clinton, provides yet another indication of the fundamental importance of emotional intelligence in the modern presidency. Clinton's political gifts, Lou, enabled him to thwart the Republicans' efforts to remove him from office after one term during the impeachment hearings. But his psychic shortcomings were debilitating. Clinton seems certain to be remembered for moving the Democratic Party to the center of the political spectrum and for many incremental departures from policy. Yet he is also likely to be remembered as a politically talented underachiever whose White House experience provides a reminder that in the absence of emotional soundness, the American presidency is indeed a problematic instrument of democratic governance. That's my analysis of Clinton and Reagan. I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, I definitely did, and I do think that most of those, if not all of those shortcomings for Mr. and Mrs. Clinton are signs of narcissism, especially the anger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you want to take a break and then get into the news, or what do you want to do?
We got a lot of news, so let's skip the break. How do you feel about that?
Okay, that's fine by me.
Yeah. It's our show. We can do what we want to.
Nobody loves our show. Don't have to sponsor us. But, Let's see. You know what? The first thing I want to get your opinion on this, and we were just talking about this off the air, folks. By the way, folks, you got to listen to me on this one subject. Like, trust me, Dr. A, this one subject. My producer, Lou Esposito, is incredibly intelligent, and when she analyzes something, you better listen to her because she knows from what she's talking about. Trust me. Now, I'm going to get her opinion on this. Bill Clinton just coincidentally found his airplane on the tarmac in Phoenix, Arizona Sky Harbor Airport a few minutes before Loretta Lynch's airplane, for some reason, landed in Phoenix. What's she doing in Phoenix anyway? I have no idea. But she landed, and they had a 30-minute meeting on board her airplane and allegedly talked about grandkids and travel.
Right. That's why the FBI agents weren't. That's why the agents weren't allowed to stay. They had to leave the plane.
Or take pictures.
Or take pictures. No phones.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. What do you think? What do you think about that? Well, in my opinion, it's highly inappropriate. Mrs. Lynch needs to either recuse herself totally from the investigation of Mrs. Clinton. And by the way, Mr. Clinton is involved in those investigations too, as is Barack Obama. They'll be the first two witnesses called when she goes to trial. Right. Or she just needs to go ahead and resign. What are your thoughts, Lou?
Well, he was the Attorney General of the state of Arkansas. She is the Attorney General for the United States of America. Their knowledge of the law and conflict of interest is a high level of knowledge. He was a law school professor. He certainly knew what he was doing, and again, with the narcissistic tendencies, didn't care. She allowed it. So she should resign, and depending on what really happened in that meeting, she should be deposed, she should be questioned, and there's no reason that he can't be prosecuted for it. If there was undue influence in that meeting, what did he ask her for? What did he offer her in return? That's my question.
How about a board of directors slot after she leaves? Please free Hillary. Don't indict Hillary, and I got a nice cushy job for you on the Clinton Foundation board of directors.
That's a bribe.
Yeah, that is a bribe. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that happened, but I tell you what, folks, I'm thinking it certainly might have happened. And they both, like Lou said, they both know better. But you know what? In today's environment, if you don't have true American patriots, people that will stand up with courage and conviction to defend the law of the land. What's the law of the land, Lou? It's the Constitution of the United States of America.
Constitution, regardless of what some judges may think.
We talked about it off the air.
Yeah.
If you don't have the people that will stand up, the true patriots who will fight and protect that wonderful founding document, then it is nothing but a suggestion, and the law of the land means nothing, especially to those people in the so-called elite. They feel they can do whatever they want and get away with anything because nobody has the guts to bring them to justice. And that's what's happening right now, Lou. Yeah. I don't think it's going to happen much longer, but it's happening right now. Your comments on that?
They have no right to take my Constitution away from me, and I resent them for it. That's my comment.
This security review, by the way, the FBI doesn't do security reviews. They do criminal investigations. This criminal investigation has two parts. They're looking at her for the Espionage Act, for compromising the security of the United States with her private little homebrew server in her bathroom, and the things she's sent back and forth. And they're also looking at bribery, state bribery, for what has occurred with her accepting money, tons of money from these foreign nations and these individuals as well, in exchange for political favors and things sent their way. Mm-hmm. You give me $50 million, we'll send you some F-16s.
Yep, exactly.
That happened, folks.
If they tie those directly, the money and the favors, which isn't hard to do. So, we got $50 million from Saudi Arabia on this date, and 6 months later, they got this fleet of F-16s. Well, she's in trouble.
Let's extend that. How about Valerie Jarrett, the Iranian-born female president of the United States? By the way, she is the first female president, by the way, folks.
Exactly. Sorry, Hillary, but it's her.
Sorry, Hillary. Us giving a hated enemy, a terrorist nation, the number one sponsor of terror in the world, Iran, $150 billion, and Obama's letting them continue to put forward their policies of getting this nuclear program going. Mm-hmm. They have their little machines going constantly. They're getting this stuff they need to build these nuclear weapons. It's happening every single day. He is not only allowing it, folks, he's facilitating because he is one of them.
Yeah.
He's one of them.
Well, yeah.
All right, come get me. Come get me, sir. Speak the truth, endure the consequences. That's Dr. Ray's mantra, and that's what Lou and I do every week.
Yep. Well, I think you're absolutely right. She wields way too much power from behind a veil. She is the man behind the curtain, or the woman behind the curtain, and I think that if you deny that or don't realize that at this point, you need to wake up.
Is she the Wizard of Obama?
Indeed.
Oh. Ramadan is over with, or this is its last day.
Yeah, tomorrow, maybe.
That wonderful Islam, the religion of peace, which you know what I think of it, has killed, I think, 400 or 500.
Don't think for a second that the terrorist attacks are over with the end of Ramadan, because I don't believe that to be the case. I believe Ramadan this year kicked off a new wave of terrorist attacks, but they're not going to stop, especially since they have had some success over the past month.
What do you think if my listeners, I want to find out what their thoughts on this are. What do you think we should take the advice of Loretta Lynch? Here's how she advised us to deal with the terrorists and their vitriolic hatred, love, unity, and compassion. That's all we have to do. Show them love, unity, and compassion.
She sounds like a Wiccan. Not that, and I don't mean to criticize Wiccans, because, when somebody hates you, if you send them love, sure, okay, that's a great concept. Love is always a great concept. But when someone hates you to the point that they want to chop off your head, no amount of love is gonna help, because someone with that much hate can't love. It's not gonna matter.
Y'all know that I'm a Christian, and Jesus Christ taught us, if somebody hits you, smite you on the left cheek, turn the other cheek and let them hit that one too. But he also said this: if you don't have a sword, trade in your cloak and get a sword so that you can equip yourself with the full armor of God. If somebody's gonna, like Lou said, they hate you, they're coming at you, you know what they want to do to you. You have been given authority. You've been told by God himself, you have the right, the duty to defend yourself.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Here is my thought on that. They call us crusaders. By God, let's be crusaders.
Exactly. If somebody, by the way, you all know, I got some advice from Slickery Trigger on this, but I went out and bought myself an M&P50, an AR-15, which is, pretty much like M16. It's not fully automatic. Pull once, you get one trigger. And I'm looking at it right now. I got it in my house for protection, because I think there are people one day that might be in the streets coming after us. I hope this doesn't happen.
Well, and I'll say this.
You've got to be prepared.
I'll say this. There's so much, talk about hatred. There's so much hatred for an AR-15, but there are more powerful rifles. There are rifles that are more accurate, and a .45 handgun does more damage than an AR-15. Yeah. So the rhetoric around the AR is just stupid.
I have a .45 as well. I remember you
can do more damage with that.
Well, that's what we had as naval aviators. We had a .45,
right?
Colt .45. But I remember that there was a FBI issue in Miami where they had a couple of guys that robbed this bank, and they were equipped with their M16s, AR-15s, and they had body armor. And the agents at that time carried 9mm, and they shot these guys 6 or 7 times. Each of them sustained 3 or 4 wounds from this 9mm that were going to eventually be mortal wounds. And yet these bad guys continued to fire because they weren't knocked down, and they killed 2 more FBI agents. If you hit somebody with a .45 caliber round in the elbow, I don't care. They're going down because of the impact that they have experienced because of that round. So that's why I have a .45 as my handgun.
Yeah. And I actually have a 9mm, but I can empty the clip in no time. So I'm not hitting you once. If you come in my door, I'm not hitting you just once. I'm hitting you multiple times.
Oh, Dr. A, I may not be a good shot. So all I got to do is hit them once in the elbow. They're going to their shoulder and they're going down.
Right.
And Slickery Trigger will back me up on that.
Yeah.
Any more time for news?
We got one. We can do one more story.
Marilyn Mosby. You know who she is?
Yeah, she's a prosecutor in Baltimore.
Yeah, she's the incompetent prosecutor in Baltimore, 35 years old, who brought these 6 law enforcement officers up for trial, many different felonies that are being accused of for the Freddie Brown case, career criminal that basically, folks, killed himself in the back of that paddy wagon. He injured himself, broke his own neck, and died. And she's 0 for 3 now, and there are people there all over to say, hey, look, you're going to go over 6. Just drop the other 3 and resign. There's, I think, somebody from Georgetown, a law professor in Georgetown, brought up some papers that she needs to basically be disbarred, which would, effectively end her career when she's done. And she is, I think, a black militant, and she's been mind raped by these people that have taught her all her life, white privilege, you've been oppressed. Folks, this is a bunch of crap. It's cultural Marxism. There's no such thing as white privilege, and we don't oppress these people anymore. At one time, they were oppressed. Slavery was horrible.
At one time, we were all oppressed.
Yeah, we were all oppressed.
We've all been oppressed. But every race, every culture has had their oppressive moment.
I've told you, Lou, what my white privilege is, and I fully expound on this. I tell you, yes, I have white privilege. I was privileged to serve the United States Navy and the United States of America and the people for 20 years as a naval aviator. That was my white privilege, and you can't take it away from me. I don't care what you say. So speak the truth, endure the consequences, folks.
Yep.
And let freedom ring. God help us.
Yes, exactly. And that was Dr. A signing off. You can catch us on K98.org, K98talk.org on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. And you can catch us on WNJC in Philly Super 1360 a.m. Tuesdays at 5 p.m. And we'll be back next week. You guys have a great 4th of July, wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.
So long, everybody.
Wake Up America Radio on WNJC is part of the Conservative Commando Radio Network.